Hi, I'm Kelly and I'm here with Karen, and we're here to answer your grief questions. If you like our content, make sure you subscribe and you'll receive notifications of new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. So, we are past the holiday season now, and so we're going to be talking more, answering some general grief questions. And if you have one, please feel free to reach out. We would love to answer them. And so, the question that I think is a really important one, and I hear a lot, Karen, is for you today. And it's, how do I deal with the perceived stigma from how my loved one died?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there are, I'll say all the time, there's no good way to lose the people we love, long-term illness, if it happens suddenly. But there's definitely differences with the how and then how people treat us and how they react. Also, the person's age. I mean, so many different circumstances, and we'll find people kind of react differently to that. In the idea of a stigma, I think those probably most often come with the people that I talk to if their loved one has died by suicide or if their loved one has died from substance abuse. So those are very challenging losses. I will always say I think they bring more questions than probably others do. I think they can bring even more guilt. There's already a lot of guilt that comes, but a lot of guilt about how something could have been prevented, how something could have been done differently. So a person who's going through that is already trying to deal with all of those sort of issues and questions in their head. And I think maybe kind of feeling that difference themselves too, from themselves to other people that have had a loss. And then I have heard people say that they are treated differently. It's not uncommon for people to have a sense of abandonment from loved ones, friends, coworkers, things like that after they've had a loss. But in my work, yours, I think as well, Kelly, like we'll hear more often that people with these types of losses are seeing that even more so. Like people just really don't know what to say or how to handle it. Or maybe it does feel like they kind of wonder what we did wrong, or maybe they don't think as much of our loved one as if, maybe it feels that their life wasn't as valuable because of the troubles maybe that they were having. It's very sad. I mean, both losses speak greatly to mental health. I have seen before in obituaries where people will, sort of list the cause of death as struggles with mental health. And I think that is sometimes a very lovely understanding of how awful, it is for a person to be getting to this point. But I think what we had talked about, and I think what we both agree on, is it just really highlights the importance for the survivors of these types of losses to find other people who have also had it. I have groups where it's, loss of parent, loss of spouse. I'll do specific things. I know you do that too. But this is one of those losses. If someone loses someone to suicide, substance abuse, I'll also say, really, with the loss of a child, I will say it's really important that you find groups with that specific population because it's just, I think, where a person can feel most supportive. Not to say that other grief support can't help, but it's going to be a different type of help, you know? What are some of the things that you've talked about with people related to this?
Well, I think it's just so unfortunate. First of all, I really want to acknowledge that it sucks that there
Yeah,
is even these stigmas
yeah,
associated with these types of loss. And it's awful when you're dealing with enough already and then to feel this stigma that maybe people aren't acknowledging your grief or talking about your loved one or bringing it up because they have their own ideas of what they think happened. I think people don't fully understand substance use disorder. They don't understand mental health. And so people make these assumptions that aren't always accurate,
yeah.
and they don't fully understand what that goes into. And actually, I read a book and I can't remember the name of it, but it was written by a Catholic priest, which I was kind of surprised about, to be honest. But it was about suicide loss and talked about, we treat people that have cancer a certain way, right? And then when there is somebody who's struggling with mental health, we don't always treat them the same way, even though it's considered an illness, right? It's impacting your brain, and so why do we have this stigma when it comes to suicide loss when we don't with somebody with cancer?
Yeah.
right? And I think those are important things to kind of think about. And so if you are experiencing loss due to this, I hate that you're having to deal with this stigma. I really do. And so what I've done is I've actually really kind of niched down some really specific groups. And last year I did a group for moms who had had teenage boys die from suicide. And I had 4 women in that group. And what the fact was that they had been in other groups that they enjoyed, and they but to be able to be with these other women who truly got it. They didn't have to justify things, they didn't have to explain things. They just could relate.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to find those people that truly can hold that space for you and hold that grief for you so you can process it. So you don't have to feel like you're justifying it or trying to explain it or whatever. And I heard the same thing from an overdose loss group. And just to be able to know that, like, we don't have to rationalize this. We don't have to explain, well, they went in, they had that knee surgery and they got hooked on the pills that way or whatever. What happens is, and I think this is really what happens, is they're trying to justify it and explain it to other people because other people do have the stigma. They judge you. You feel judged. You're not bringing up things. I've even heard of a family who had a child die from an overdose and they just didn't even acknowledge that their child died
Mm, yeah.
because they didn't want people to be judging them. And that's heartbreaking to me to hear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think people are, feeling the judgment to themselves, but they're really feeling the judgment toward the person that they lost. And they're
Mhm.
going to feel very protective of that person. And when people are sort of not really giving sympathy or not showing any type of concern or expressing anything in that way, it can really feel like not just you're being shunned, but that your loved one who has died is as well. And it's just this like really final insult on top of everything else that's, as you said, just sucks. It's really, really unfortunate. There's a really lack of education, I think, in terms of what people feel like are choices, that someone makes. And I know you and I had said that like this is such a big topic that we'll probably have to keep going on it with, some other videos in the future because there's just a lot to say about it. But I think for now, it's a matter of just helping people find the right support. And a lot of times what I say with the work that we do, we're not fixing things for people, but what I am hoping to do is validate these experiences so that people can in turn be validating it for themselves when they're feeling a certain way or when they're feeling justified in like how they respond to that kind of situation, to feel that that's okay to do that.
Yeah. And if you're in a group and you're feeling like there's getting to be sometimes, which can happen, is that comparing of
Mm,
losses and feeling like your loss is being minimized because of how they died, then maybe it's time to either speak to the facilitator. If it's a peer led group, maybe you find a different group.
yeah. 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 I mean, you hate to say it, it's like it would be nice, but you don't want to feel alone in a grief group. And I
Exactly.
think you and I are both very aware of this and try to be very, very inclusive with all of that. But, sometimes my experience has been I did a general grief group in person. This was years ago, and it was a very general grief group. I mean, my goodness, we had every population, every age, every loss. And we did find our connections and we did find our commonalities, and general grief groups can be wonderful. But I think there are times where there are just too many extremes and a person just doesn't feel like the people sitting next to them get it. And you want that in a grief group. If you're not going to find it anywhere else, it should at least be there.
Exactly. Grief feels so isolating and lonely as it
Right.
is.
Right.
Don't don't feel like you have to stay in a group if you're feeling that way.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Well, tough topic,
Yeah, it is.
and definitely a topic that we could be talking all about. But, Karen, how final thoughts, how does somebody deal with the perceived stigma from how their loved one died?
Yeah. Well, again, I think understanding where that stigma comes from, which is just a lack of education, a lack of understanding, um, and really just recognizing the importance of finding support. We're talking about group support and finding good group support, but also hopefully recognizing that there is a person in your life too that can provide that support, that loved your loved one, that understood that they're a good person that went through a very difficult time and struggled, and can provide that support too. So it's not easy, but getting the good support is going to be definitely really important.
Well, thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Kelly.
And thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe. We'll be back with new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Take care of yourself.